Yourselves, and then I have you all introduce yourselves. I'm Hank Chambers. I'm a law professor here at University of Richmond. Been at this for a while, and it's going to be great hearing from you all this morning.
Good morning. I'm Barry Anderson. I'm an associate justice on the Minnesota Supreme Court. I've been with the program for a number of years. I also had the experience of being an assistant coach years ago, and I get some idea of the stress you're under. We're going to have a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Zinkin. I'm a career law clerk at the New Hampshire Supreme Court. Been here for about 21 years, litigated employment cases in San Francisco for about 12 prior, and have been judging at the state level for some time, between 5 and 10 years. This is my first time at nationals, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. So tell us who you are, where you're from.
Hi, we are from North Smithfield High School. We are freshmen. I'm Julia Mandeville.
Hello, I'm Zeta Wenzel.
Hello, I'm TJ Smith.
Hello, I'm Grace Lane.
Fabulous. And tell us about your teachers.
Our teacher is Mrs. O'Brien.
Fabulous. It's great to see you. All right. So we are going to do Unit 4, Question 2 this morning. I'll read it for you, and then we'll hear your opening statement. Members of Congress are not only legislators, but they are also inquisitorial and should meet frequently to inspect the conduct of public officers. How effectively do you believe Congress has used its investigatory power? Explain the differences, if any, between Congress's power to investigate and the power of oversight. Which power, in your opinion, is more significant? How effectively do you believe Congress has used its oversight powers? We're ready for your opening statement.
Although never directly enumerated in the Constitution, Congress's use of oversight and investigatory powers is critical to keeping the government in check and allowing the legislative branch to fulfill its duties. Madison stated in Federalist 51, quote, "In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, you must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place oblige it to control itself," end quote. The legislative branch has abandoned some of its responsibilities more recently and allowed the executive to take more power because using these powers is a taxing, time-taking process. Although some arguments show Congress fails to use its investigatory powers, this is not entirely due to congressional abdication, but to executive usurpation.
The power of oversight is more significant than the power to investigate because it is an ongoing process and a crucial check on the executive. Oversight leads to investigation and change in the government. Ever since the Legislative Reorganization Act of 1946, congressional committees were told to exercise continual watchfulness over executive agencies. By doing so, members of Congress should monitor how the executive branch is enforcing their legislation and spending money. Executive agencies were created by Congress through legislation, but as the public looks to government agencies to solve problems, Congress often steps back and the oversight process has become politicized.
The power to investigate is an implied power given to Congress that falls under all legislative powers as well as the necessary and proper clause. Investigations help Congress understand that they need to enact legislation and uncover wrongdoings in the government. One significant investigation was the Watergate scandal in 1972, which led the people to restore their faith in the government after it was lost during the hunt for communists by HUAC during the Cold War. The investigations led many executive officials, including President Nixon, to resign from their positions and set precedent for presidential subpoena. However positive these powers can be, they can also be abused to benefit one political party over another. In the Benghazi investigation, Republican Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy spent millions of dollars on 7 different investigations against Hillary Clinton. Republicans released their final report in June of 2016 with no new evidence of Clinton doing anything wrong.
With the importance of the oversight power comes responsibility to use it correctly and enough. There are some cases, such as the investigation of the CIA done by the Church Committee, where the public sees Congress using their inquisitorial powers to check the government. In 1975, this committee found that the CIA had hundreds of thousands of reports and were conducting tests on people who had no ties to government intelligence, as well as targeting civil rights activists. Eventually, the information found led to Congress crafting many intelligence community reforms. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act required the executive branch to get warrants before wiretapping and surveillance. However, Congress does not oversee and investigate nearly as much as it should.
With the growing and at times alarming power of the executive branch, the need for oversight grows as well. Unfortunately, since oversight does not make headlines, there is little motivation for Congress to exercise this vital power. Another matter that could explain why these powers aren't used to their full potential is because it takes a lot of work to conduct oversight and investigations. Many people are questioned and a great amount of money is used. It is easier to turn a blind eye to the intimidating executive than to question them and spend so much looking into their issues. Even though Congress has neglected its power here, representatives like Katie Porter could be a significant help. Representative Porter called the HHS watchdog to investigate dialysis providers and look into the groups that are putting patients' lives at risk by increasing the cost of medication in 2019. She also called for further oversight into this issue when it didn't seem to be fixed. With the help of Representative Porter, people were able to afford their medication.
Currently, the powers of investigation and oversight should be considered nearly as important as the lawmaking process because it asserts the power of the legislative branch. It is crucial to our government system of checks and balances that members of Congress continue to pursue their role not only as lawmakers, but those in charge of investigating and use their inquisitorial powers to the full extent.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much. So when investigating, how much of Congress's power to investigate it trenches on the Department of Justice's power to investigate criminal matters? So, I mean, is Congress stepping on the Department of Justice's toes when it investigates matters that might lead to criminal charges, do you think?
Well, I would say that Congress's power to investigate is sort of a power that's kind of above the government in general. It's kind of Congress being able to oversee everything. So maybe it is stepping on different departments and taking some of that power because it was intended to be a sort of overseeing of everything.
Okay, because y'all mentioned the Church Commission, and sounds like the Church Commission looked into some things that looked like they were fairly criminal. At what point should Congress turn over that information to the Department of Justice, or should Congress just say, we'll go ahead and take care of it on our own?
It's definitely important that Congress gives this information over to the Justice Department, because although we do have separation of powers, when like criminal charges come into play, that would be an important matter for the courts to deal with.
Gotcha. Justice Anderson, what you got?
So in your statement, you noted that the legislature has abandoned or ceded its powers to the executive branch. Can you give me some examples of that? And what, if anything, should Congress do to try to recapture that authority?
Well, just in general, asserting their power using these investigatory and oversight powers is important to limit the power of the executive.
Going along with what Grace said, just the legislature using like its checks on the executive branch, that is taking back some power that hasn't always been used by the legislative branch.
So by exercising its power to hold hearings, that may help restore the balance between the judicial and between the legislative and the executive branch.
Absolutely. And also passing and enacting acts and laws is also a good example of how they can take some power back to limit the power of the executive, or just acts in general.
I'll pass on to my Ann. Go ahead with your question.
Oh, you're muted.
There we go. I'm wondering what you think makes an effective investigation. Do we measure it just by outcome? I think you mentioned the Benghazi investigation that cost a lot of money and didn't come up with a lot as an ineffective investigation, but I'm wondering if that's the only measure of effectiveness.
I believe that all investigations are effective because it is the legislative branch using their power to make sure that the executive branch is checked and that agencies are checked and that there is nothing wrong happening in other branches.
I'd like, Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, one really important measure is like how much legislation or how much Congress just learns in general from the investigation. Like after Watergate, that influenced Congress to pass a lot of more legislation limiting the executive branch and just like checking it in general.
So I'd like to ask a little bit about something a little bit about the partisanship issue. And I'm just wondering if you think that partisanship is a problem. And if it is a problem, is there a way in which Congress can conduct hearings in a more bipartisan fashion? What kinds of reforms could we see to help improve bipartisanship?
Partisanship certainly is a problem in our government today in general. Everything has become so politicized and so about the political parties. So I think it certainly needs to be more of sort of like a Supreme Court type thing where it's just judgment in general, not judgment based on your political party or based on what you think because of politics.
I agree with Zeta, and this starts with creating more bipartisan committees to conduct oversight in general, and that will lead to more fair investigations and a wide range of subpoenas.
So help me out. When you all talk about bipartisan committees, what do you mean? Because all of the congressional committees do have representatives from both sides. So what will get us to a spirit of bipartisanship through the committees, do you think?
I believe that if people in these committees started to fight for what is like, believe in what is right instead of believing in their political party and like what they think should happen, if they see what is truly best for our nation, that would definitely get us one step closer to completely nonpartisan.
I agree with TJ. I also think an idea of how it could be unpartisan is to have an equal amount of representatives. It's pretty tricky to have someone just forget about their political stance and political party in general. So maybe an equal amount of representatives from each party could be a solution.
Okay. I'm curious, when Congress, during the very early part of the Republic, Congress showed up for a couple months and then left town. It sounds like you want a Congress that's around all the time to do lots of investigation and lots of oversight. Is that consistent with how Congress was thought of in the early Republic?
Well, the founders definitely did set up Congress to not be there all the time. But as the executive power is growing, it's important that the amount of oversight and investigation being conducted grows as well with it. So maybe what the founders intended should evolve into what we need in a more modern day society.
Gotcha.
Madison also had the idea that the president and the executive branch wasn't going to be the primary branch in government, which is kind of contrasting Hamilton's views. He thought that Congress would be the frontmost branch in government. When you think of the government, you think of Congress.
Gotcha. And what do you think? I know we're just about out of time, so I am, yeah. We can ask a question, exactly. All right. Thank y'all very much. Judges, comments?
I thought you all did a great job considering the fact that you're freshmen. I am the mom of a freshman in high school, and I can't even imagine him attempting this. So good for you for taking on this work and doing the learning that was required for us to have a relatively substantive conversation. I thought your opening statement was pretty good. I thought that it seemed like you faltered a little bit with the question and answer period, but I think that that's about sort of practicing and it's really, really hard to think on your feet. I suffer from that as well. But overall, I think you did a good job and you should be really proud of yourselves.
I echo what my colleague has said here, and I agree with the fact that I think you did really well here. I asked you that question about bipartisanship, and your response was more bipartisan committees. That sounds like just sort of a trite answer, but it's actually very profound, and I'll tell you why. How you go about developing a culture of bipartisanship, really starts with setting a goal that you're going to have a bipartisan committee. And so if you look at the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, the Senate Intelligence Committee, Mark Warner and Marco Rubio as the chair and the minority lead, really have worked pretty hard to build a culture of bipartisanship. The House Intelligence Committee seems to be a different story. And so when you talk about that as something that we should be working on, that's, I think, really sort of a key to this whole question. So as my colleague said, trying to respond to questions on your feet. You got 3 lawyers here, and all 3 of us have stories to tell about the question we got asked, the answer to which we didn't really know, and you do the best you can under the circumstances. I thought this was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it, and you clearly understand the material. So good luck.
I agree with what my colleagues have said. Good opening, lots of good ideas, lots of good thoughts. Certainly the idea of politicization is a tough one. And of course, the distinction between investigation and oversight is can be relatively small. So I think y'all did a really nice job of going down those paths and doing a nice job of thinking your way through bunches of issues. And of course, when I threw in the early Republic stuff, just to see whether you guys were on your feet, you were on your feet. So good stuff. I think y'all did a nice job, and good luck moving forward.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
All right.